Today, I invite you to use your imagination. Consider ourselves as the church at Philippi, receiving these inspired words by letter from a leader and brother we love and who loves us. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say, rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to everyone. The Lord is near. Do not worry about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, beloved, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence, and if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Keep on doing the things that you have heard and learned and received and seen in me. And the God of peace will be with you. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Don't you know? There, I said it. Now you can check that off your list. That little phrase, along with its pretentious punctuation marks, with the question mark and the exclamation point smashed together, it has appeared in every one of my sermons that I've preached to you as a pastor. You might like to know the backstory. When I was a fledgling pastor in Mobile, Alabama, before I wrote out my sermons as a script, word for word, I was prone to verbal tics and throwaway phrases that tend to go with extemporaneous preaching, right? So one Sunday after the service, I went to the narthex, and this woman comes up to me with her little boy in tow, and she looks at me and she says, "You didn't say it today." And I asked her what she meant, and she said, "You didn't say, 'Don't you know?'" And I told her I didn't know that I said, "Don't you know?" And she explained to me that it was a little game that she played to keep her wiggly son listening to the sermons. She would tell him to just listen to Pastor George when he'll say, "Don't you know?" And then he would listen to the rest of the sermon too and be quiet. Well, I promised her I would include it from then on, and I carried it with me to Wilshire. It's been a fun little thing, sort of like, how you look for the little plastic Jesus that's somewhere buried in the Mardi Gras king cake, right? So I used this with my kids too, and I recommended it to other parents to keep their kids listening through the years. And I have to admit, it was also occasionally a reminder to me not to get too highfalutin in my theological language, that there would be a "don't you know," and it would keep me grounded. So as today is the first of the two farewell sermons that I will preach to you as your pastor, I want to use this phrase and its punctuation marks too, to remind you of things you already know, but maybe don't know you know. So think of these words as revealing what you do and reminding you to keep doing what you do when I am not here week by week to tell you. This is what I think Paul was doing with the church at Philippi. His letter to that church pulses with affection. If you ever had to choose a church from the New Testament to emulate, it would surely be Philippi. Definitely not Corinth, right? So by the time Paul gets to the end of his letter to them, he tells them a few things to do that are probably among the things they already do that he means when he concludes, keep on doing the things that you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, and the God of peace will be with you. Now, I'm no Apostle Paul, and don't hear me trying to say to you that I have been an icon you should model yourself after. But Paul was a spiritual leader to that church, and you have allowed me to be that to you for these 33 years. And we have learned some things about how to live together as we follow Christ. And the practices we have adopted have allowed the church to remain vital amid changes in our local community, and dear God, don't we know, in the Baptist community, certainly, so many changes. But churches are communities of practice. We are what we do. And the more we practice the right things, the likelier it is that it strengthens our souls and the ties that bind, because we never know what's coming. Even if we do this, it's not like everything will always go well if we do, because life is like a box of chocolates, as Forrest Gump's mama always said, right? You never know what you're going to get, but regardless of what you get, good or bad, the more you stick to the things you know that develop Christian character, the more resilient you will become to be able to face whatever may come. Now, the cover art on your order of worship today is Auguste Rodin's The Thinker. It was specifically chosen. Mark McKenzie told me this week that the original title of the piece was The Poet. It was intended to stand at the front of an exhibit that Rodin was putting together called The Gates of Hell, which would depict the poet Dante and his Divine Comedy. But I think this fits us. We are a thinking church, something sadly few Baptist churches are accused of. We don't go about our business willy-nilly. We aren't driven by pure emotion, though we're not opposed to it, as you can tell. We aren't tossed about by the winds of culture. We try to discern the spirits and then submit to the Spirit. As our mission statement puts it, we are building a community of faith shaped by the Spirit of Jesus Christ. In this, we are inheritors of a faith tradition that goes all the way back to Philippi, back further still to Israel, and forward, yes, to even these last 70 years as Wilshire Baptist Church. We are not slaves of tradition. We are products of it. A phrase we often use around here is the Wilshire way. And it points to a pattern of life: deliberate discipleship, mindful ministry, conscious community. We are intentional about extending grace to and making a place for every body. This is our living tradition. As the church historian Yaroslav Pelikan put it, tradition is the living faith of the dead. Traditionalism is the dead faith of the living. So let's live tradition, right? But we honor tradition not by doing just what our forebears did and never deviating from it, but rather by doing as they did, seeking the mind of Christ in our time and following in his way wherever that may lead. Paul tells the Philippians to rejoice in the Lord always. And again I say, rejoice. Joy is the theme of this letter. But he doesn't take it for granted. He reminds them twice, as if they need reminding, right? It's an imperative. Make joy in the Lord together the hallmark of your life. Don't neglect it. Attend to it. Practice it. My good friend over here, the crier, Steve Brookshire, is my regular golfing partner. He went for a week to Scottsdale, Arizona a couple of years ago to take a course called Vision 54. Now, the name of this comes from the idea that if you were to birdie every single hole on a typical 18-hole golf course, you would shoot 54. Never been done as far as I know. Honestly, maybe somebody, but the point is, it never will be if you can't imagine it. This wasn't a class on making the perfect swing, as if technique is what matters most. It's about thinking your way to better play. And to do that, you must clear your mind of distractions and let go about worry about the future. They had every player begin each day with a gratitude journal. So you had to start every day by being thankful and saying what you were thankful for of the gifts of life that were yours and that were already present to you all around. And Steve came away from this thinking, why should this be only for golf? We should all be doing this every day, right? And this reminds me of Chesterton's pithy words. Thanks are the highest form of thought. And happiness, the gratitude, is happiness doubled by wonder. I love that. And I think it's the heart of what Paul is saying here. When we focus our mind on what we are thankful for, and we cast all of our anxieties on God in prayer, then we experience the peace of God, and joy overflows. The next section of Paul's last words is the call to attend to the virtues. Whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things, he says. Think about these things. Now, this is not a Pollyanna glad game he's talking about here, where you just ignore all the evil and injustice of the world and live as though everything is fine if you just think right, There's much work to do still in challenging all those things that hurt people in the world, that deface the image of God in every human being. The church must speak to this. But if we do not simultaneously live ourselves as a community of virtue, we will never offer the world anything. It needs a vision of what things might be like if God's dream for the world came true. We will never be perfect, never shoot 54, so to speak, but we can become more of what we are meant to be by thinking about and practicing these things. This is the secret sauce that makes Wilshire who we are. When I came to you years ago, my predecessor, Bruce McKeever, who had served for 30 years, told me, George, churches are either pills or plums. Wilshire is a plum. I got the idea he didn't want me to mess that up. But what he meant by that is what I have found to be true about you. Some churches just seem to find ways to make problems. Others, like you, seem to find ways to solve problems. We would never have done what we have done if we had not kept this character consistently and lived into it. I am who I am because of you. I have grown and changed, and so have you. There's an African word that summarizes this, Ubuntu. It means roughly, I am because we are. The late great South African Archbishop Desmond Tutu described it this way: Ubuntu is the essence of being human. It speaks of how my humanity is caught up and bound up inexplicably with yours. It says not as Descartes did, I think, therefore I am, but rather I am because I belong. I need other human beings in order to be human. When the pastor search committee presented my nomination to you to be their next pastor, some people were concerned that I was too young for the challenge. They were probably right. But after some discussion, an elderly deacon rose in the meeting and he spoke these words. He said, I'm not worried about whether he's up to the challenge because I know we are. Great pastors, he said, don't make great churches. Great churches make great pastors. He was right then, and to whatever extent I have become a good pastor to you, I owe it to you. Soon you will have a new pastor, and I am not worried, because I know that you know what to do, don't you know? You are up to the challenge. If you continue to do what you have learned and received and heard and seen in our time together. Practice these things, dear church, and the God of peace will be with you always.